What really happens when AI meets your operating model? Here's a hint. It doesn't smooth over the cracks, it exposes them. In this episode of Elegant Simplicity, I'm joined by Tejal as we explore why organizations keep adding complexity, what happens when AI hits a broken process, and why subtraction, not addition, is the real secret to transformation. If you're wrestling with AI, complexity, or operating model fatigue, this is the conversation you can't afford to miss.
Yeah. So hello and welcome to Elegant Simplicity. I'm Nick Richmond, the Director of Design at Tricordant, and today we're exploring a truth that's becoming increasingly difficult for leaders to ignore. What happens when AI meets your operating model? Spoiler alert, it tells the truth. It exposes your operating model. Tejal, it's great to have you here. We've been talking for, I think, about a year now. I think
Yeah,
we first met at what was it, King's College London book event, something like that?
exactly. All about OD, and we just connected.
Yeah, and we've been speaking for the past year, and you've been dancing in and out of work and speaking at different gigs across the UK, and I think internationally as well. But I also asked you to speak at an event back in October, so it's great to have you here and to speak with you again. Before we jump in, do you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Tejal. I am a specialist in business transformation across different kinds of organizations. I've just left Kantar, which is a marketing organization where I was their global head of talent. My background is quite unusual in that I've got financial experience, commercial experience, transformation experience, talent experience, and a lot of AI experience as well. And I think it's quite compelling in today's world where the pace of change is just exponential and organizations are really struggling to adapt and adopt AI to really create value. And so I'm looking for a new role. I've got a consulting portfolio as well. And what I'm really uh, enthused by is helping organizations drive transformation at scale where people are at the very heart of that transformation.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of pull on that thread around AI and have a think about how that relates to the elegant simplicity
Mm.
theme we're exploring. So if we begin at that point when you started implementing AI, what did you notice about the operating model and wider organization? Did it feel ready for AI, or did AI immediately start revealing some hidden cracks?
Yeah. And it's such a big question. What I've learned is that an organization's readiness for AI has got very little to do with the actual technology itself. It's got everything to do with how tolerant that organization is
Mm,
of ambiguity, of paradox, of discomfort. Um, and if your organization struggles to hold those two truths at once, move fast but be safe, cut costs but protect culture,
mm,
uh,
mm.
simplify but deliver that growth, then AI is going to feel really destabilizing. And Kantar, for example, was a private equity backed company, and that tension is even sharper. So there's this just relentless focus on progress, on performance, on transformation. But at the same time, people are tired, they're anxious, they're already carrying the weight of multiple transformations and they're spread and pulled in a myriad of different directions. So then when AI comes, it's landing in a system that's already quite stretched. And that's when I think the real truth comes out. AI doesn't politely just integrate into your operating model, it really interrogates it.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and most global organizations have grown with legacy processes, legacy systems. The tech is kind of old and patchy, sticky plasters holding it together. Uh, and particularly when I look at processes between, for example, our client delivery teams onshore
mm.
and our ops teams that are offshore, you suddenly see these cracks that you've been papering over for years. And the kind of things that manifest are workflows with, 15 to 25 handoffs. You've got decision rights that sort of look clear on paper in your neat RACI, But in practice, they aren't that clear. You've got data that's scattered all over the place, and systems that don't necessarily talk to each other. You've got teams almost acting as human
Mm.
APIs, connecting things together with this tacit knowledge.
Yes.
And you will have work that just exists because of internal reasons. You need to report how things are going. You've got meetings, you've got governance layers. They don't really change the outcome,
Yeah.
for that client at all. They're just internal things.
Mm.
And what I also learned was when you're in a global organization, it just gets magnified between different regions or markets. So you might have like slight variances in those markets, but then when you're trying to apply AI in a scalable way, what happens is AI makes all of that visible.
Yeah.
It's a bit like switching on the light in a messy room. The mess was always there, you just couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think it's really difficult, and I don't think there's a perfect organization unless you are a small AI native already organization. And I think organizations need to manage that complexity.
Yeah, so it's really I'm hearing you say you need a whole system response to AI.
Yeah,
It's not something you just throw in and hope for the best. And my own experience is that I find many organizations have two responses. One is they just throw AI at the wall and hope for the
right.
best,
Yeah,
and that can just add to lots of complexity. And others where they think, oh, we'll just do this bit here, and they
mm,
use it in a transactional way,
yeah,
and that can have some positive effects, but not necessarily. And we'll probably get into that in a little bit.
mm,
So, if we think about organization design, which is ultimately about division of work and integration of effort, and one of the key models that kind of takes that and explodes it out into a framework is the Galbraith star model. You've got
yeah,
strategy, structure, processes, rewards, and people. All of these, as I was listening to you, I was almost checking them off in my mind, saying, yeah,
yeah,
Tejal is saying that all of these kind of
yeah,
domains are being impacted by AI, even if AI isn't in that particular domain. It may be in
yeah,
process, but it's showing up in governance. It's showing up in your
yeah,
reporting lines. It's impacting your how people are going to be rewarded and what people's jobs are going to be. So
yeah.
I'm just curious. Does attention show up first in one particular place, or when it's first announced, where would that first
Yeah.
attention maybe show up?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is going to show up across all of the points of the star of the Gale star. But I think where you're really going to see it first is your processes. Um, AI hates ambiguity,
Yeah.
and AI exposes that sort of fuzzy ownership. How do decisions get made? Who approves? Who's accountable? What are those handoffs like? If what are great outcomes? If that isn't crystal clear, then AI stalls. And in those in global matrixed organizations, you see time and time and again, different teams believe they've got unique needs, and they will sort of tweak the processes to accommodate. We're special, right? And therefore it needs to work for us. However, when you strip that back, the reality is actually it just creates more complexity in your system. And humans tolerate that variation, right? We tolerate that really, really well. But machines don't. And so every undocumented workaround becomes a blocker. I think rewards are really important as well. If people are rewarded for volume, for control, for heroics, AI becomes quite performative rather than transformational. And I just want to double click on the heroics, and by that, it's people being the sticky glue that makes that process work, be it manual adjustments or workarounds, or
Mm.
relying on knowing how to get things done, and relying on the relationship you've got with so and so in a different team to get things done. If you are rewarding for that,
Mm.
then it's really difficult, right? Because you're rewarding
Mm.
inefficient operating models. And then I
Yeah.
think structure is important as well, because I firmly believe that you've got this sort of middle manager layer. And if you were to look really objectively at the purpose of those managerial roles, I imagine there is quite a lot to do with compensating for design gaps. So things like poor data flows, unclear decisions, even lack of trust. And if those roles are existing for internal purposes, it's even worse. So I think, you know, the structure of your organization is going to be key. But then, of course, it's going to impact people. Of course, it's going to impact everything else as well. But I think the main piece is where you've got AI, those sort of invisible decision points suddenly become quite explicit. And, you know, you have a realization within your organization that actually those decision rights are quite fragmented over all these roles that have evolved over time. And so, you know, AI doesn't tolerate that ambiguity. But what it does do, if you really want to find the value in organizations, is that it forces a shift towards rewarding simplicity, rewarding consistency, and rewarding like very clear outcomes that are transformative rather than performative.
Yeah. So that real important aspect of understanding what is human work and where, because humans can deal with the complexity, but
Exactly.
also, you know, where can you utilize AI to augment and enhance? And the better word I've heard recently is elevate human
Yeah.
capacity and human
Yeah.
ability to deliver. And I remember in one of my recent projects, I was working with a AI enhanced org design project in the supply chain. And where the tension showed up first there was actually in the people, because this organization, everything was very tightly controlled from the center.
Right.
And this was a UK-based organization. And they couldn't really change much in terms of their value chain. They couldn't change much in terms of their tech stack immediately. There's some local changes they could make in utilizing Copilot and a few other bits and pieces. But the people, it impacted them, and the tension showed up there almost immediately in the first workshop, where there's one person who's on the verge of tears throughout the workshop because the person thought that their jobs were all done, that AI was here to take over all the jobs. And we're like, well, we need to be really clear. And the leader was really clear that all their jobs were going to be safe. And yet there's still this resonating fear in the organization of what could happen. And so it's really about working with those tensions as they show up, helping, and in this case, helping people to realize that's more about giving them the opportunity to experiment, to try things out, to learn, to grow. So building in that AI literacy and building up their strength and their capacity to do good work.
And actually,
Yes.
on that point, just before you move on, what we found was building up that AI literacy and that confidence to actually use the tools was really, really important across the whole organization. And, you know, that is just great change management in terms of giving people the tools, giving people the training, you know, power hours we had, power half hours we had, hackathons, promptathons, spotlighting those champions. All of that stuff is great. And, you know, that enabled, certainly at Kantar, people to really get comfortable with the tools, and people were saving between 2 and 10 hours a week, which is great, right? And actually enable Kantar to become Microsoft's top third Copilot user. But when you then try and translate that in individual productivity to an enterprise level, it becomes really difficult to find that productivity going through the P&L. And that's where I think you need to be really choiceful around using AI to fix problems in your organization, to fix pain points in your organization, because that's when you get the real ROI. And I think from a people perspective, you know, it's really important to build the narrative around why you're bringing in AI, you know, yes, to drive productivity, but yes, you know, to build that competitiveness into your business model. And that will require people to have require them to need to have some agency around. It's on them to use the tools to skill up and think about how they move themselves up the value curve, as well as the organization finding the value creation opportunities.
Yeah. And just talking about AI using a metaphor of X-ray, we use AI in our design processes. So it's like an X-ray looking at your organization.
Yeah.
We do that by creating a digital twin to help you understand their strengths and weaknesses in the operating model. But also remember, and linking back to one of our prior conversations, you said something about don't try AI on broken processes. So, that X-ray vision will kind of zone in on here's these opportunities where you can improve. And so don't just throw AI at something and hope for the best, because we know that AI will amplify whatever is already there, whether good or bad. And there's a number of examples that have been in the news. There's back in 2018, Amazon's recruitment algorithm. Now, they said they never actually implemented this, but what they realized they'd done is they'd trained the AI on 10 years of resumes, but that historical data had reflected a male-dominated industry. And of course, what that meant, that was the AI thought that's what you're looking for and excluded women. And then another one was, for our American listeners, is Zillow's iBuyers business. So this is the American real estate business that used AI to predict home prices for instant buying and flipping. However, the process was broken because the AI couldn't account for those local unobservable factors like layout or home condition. And of course, that led to a $500 million loss and the shutdown of that entire division. So, do you have a story maybe you can share where AI didn't just fail to fix a problem, but actually amplify the weakness?
Yeah. And I think, this point around not applying AI on broken processes is so important. And I think it's really important to identify where those processes are broken in the first place. So I've got a couple of examples. One is around, I've been involved in offshoring work to global delivery centers in India, Malaysia, Poland, for example. And, typically, the process to offshore work is just so inordinately more painful than you ever imagine that you end up offshoring the work as it is without actually redesigning it in the first place. And so what you're doing is you're moving that inefficiency somewhere else.
And then cut and paste.
Exactly right. And the ambition is always in phase 2, you will clean up the processes and really optimize. But you never get to phase 2 because you've overrun on your budgets. You've got no team to deliver that. And then in today's world, AI arrives and, very logically, you kind of think, well, let's start with automating repeatable, low value, high volume work, typically the kind of stuff that sits in global delivery centers. It seems sensible. But actually, what really happens is that you just end up replicating that inefficiency at scale. And so, AI acts as a mirror to highlight those fragmented workflows, the inconsistent quality between different offshore hubs, potentially high rework, that tacit knowledge sitting within teams. And it highlights that dysfunction. And I think, the other example more from a HR perspective is more recently I worked with a team of people ops who wanted to put a chatbot to sit over a knowledge base of HR policies and processes. And the motivation was to improve that colleague experience so they get instant answers, but also to reduce the headcount within that function. Now, they'd moved to a ticketing system for their HR service delivery in 2023 or 2024. They spent a year putting that together. And they just sort of lifted and shifted, right, the work. And then when it comes to applying AI and thinking about a chatbot, they were at a starting point with 4,000 artifacts. And these could be, policies, processes, exceptions, different ones by market, right? And when you really looked at it, there was a lot of cleanup needed. And so actually AI is useful in that respect as well, because it can help accelerate that cleanup. But things like having consistent policies and aligning everything to that, archiving the old ones, thinking about exceptions and local variations, you know, you've got contradictory guidance. And, you know, whereas you started with 4,000, you came down to 400 artifacts.
Yeah.
And I guess my point on this is arguably, why didn't you clean that up to start with? Organizations aren't motivated,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that's going to trip you up to
Yeah.
start with, because actually humans can navigate that chaos because you know who to pick up the phone to and call, or Teams message, right? And so I suppose both of my examples have got the same theme around, you need to really understand the work first, and you really need to understand the inputs going in and how clean and coherent they are to get any sensible kind of answer on the other side through AI.
Yeah, and that really connects to one of our themes in elegant simplicity, which is really subtract before you add.
Right.
And I know in one healthcare system that we've been supporting, the breakthrough came when leaders recognized they needed to simplify first, you know, reducing the number of divisions, unnecessary governance, etc., as you've also described. So here's the big question, though. In today's environment of high pressure, stakeholder demands, expectations of progress, how do you balance the pressure to demonstrate that rapid progress with the need to slow down, simplify, and redesign first?
I think it's really tough. I think it's really, really tough. And I think when leaders want to show visible progress, right? And rightly so. But as we talked about, scaling AI on top of complexity, you know, you're building a skyscraper on sand that's gonna, so it's on weak foundations. So what I would suggest is, like, people need to get really clear on the why. What are the areas that are going to make a real difference to your business in terms of creating that value, be it revenue opportunities, be it productivity improvements, be it cost improvements, be it client experience improvements? You know, what are they? And I'd encourage organizations to subtract the kind of 65 different work streams that they've got all running concurrently and really narrow down to the 2 or 3 that are going to make the biggest difference. And then I think there's something around really understanding the work that gets done in those processes, and then thinking about how do we simplify this to remove the variation, to clarify decision rights, fix the data, of course, and really simplify that work. And that's when you are able to reimagine the work, to think about, can you automate parts of this with AI? Do you use AI to augment humans to do the work better? Or do you need, you know, humans to really own this part of the work? And what we learned was, yes, you need competent people to do that, but you need cross-functional teams to do that work. It isn't just the business, and it isn't just tech, and it isn't just HR. You need a mix of people within your teams who've got that technical competence, but they've also got that systems thinking mentality. They've got good judgment. They've got creativity to basically reimagine the art of the possible, rather than just get narrowed into what we've done in the past. And then I think there's something around testing it, and how does that A/B testing land? You know, if you've kind of AI automated, can you compare it to human, you know, all your existing processes, and be really clear around what does great look like, who's accountable, how do you audit it? And then you are able to scale it, right? Because the learnings that you've got from, you know, that one use case, you will be able to scale much quicker. And I think what we found is that it gives you sort of quick wins, gives you that measurable value, but really importantly, it builds confidence in your teams that you can solve quite a difficult, complex problem, and build a foundation that can then scale. But aligned with the research sitting behind elegant simplicity, it's that subtractive mindset in action. It's all around removing first, and then you accelerate.
Yeah, so that's, you know, simplicity isn't naivety, it's sophistication. And that's why Steve Jobs and Apple called it the ultimate sophistication for a reason. As you've explained, it takes discipline, more energy, more engagement, more leadership courage
Yeah.
to subtract than to add.
Yeah.
And of course, as you also explained, AI really thrives once that subtraction has happened. So if you reduce
Absolutely.
things down to the minimum, where the value's really been created, clear away the stuff that shouldn't really be there, that's probably taking up people's time, and maybe adding bureaucracy and complexity into the organization. So this last question links into our next podcast, which we're going to be exploring around what your culture awards. And you almost hinted at it earlier in our conversation.
Mm.
So given everything we've discussed, the additive bias, the tendency to bolt on solutions, the AI amplifies complexity unless the foundations are sound. Do you believe AI can truly be a simplifier, or will it always risk amplifying complexity unless leaders fundamentally change their mindsets?
Yeah. I think you have to be so intentional with
Mm-hmm.
how you apply AI. So I do think AI can be a simplifier, but it's only going to work if those leaders actually actively choose simplicity. And as we talked about, if you don't do that, then AI will absolutely amplify that complexity. It'll accelerate that misalignment. It exposes all those broken processes, right? But where it becomes genuinely powerful is when leaders embrace that subtraction. So removing the layers, removing the variation that you talked about, it cutting through that noise to find the value.
Yeah.
But all of that only works in the right organizational culture. So if your culture rewards simplification, experimentation, learning, iterating versus that command and control, perfection, focus on internal policies, then AI is going to accelerate because the culture makes a difference. People feel safe to stop doing things. They feel safe to challenge old ways of working and
Mm,
try new
mm,
ways of working.
mm,
And a big part of that is the quality of your leadership and your managers to create that coaching culture within, local parts of your business. And in that situation, AI becomes a real catalyst than a burden.
mm.
And to go back to what Steve Jobs said, I think is absolutely right. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication because actually, from an org structure perspective and org design perspective, that simplicity is that ultimate competitive advantage if that culture is right to reward the right kind of behaviors and mindsets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I kind of just want to keep on the point around the courage that leaders need.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to start talking about elegant simplicity is because I found leaders unable, unwilling, or whatever it was, not able to say no.
Mm.
It was always a yes,
Mm.
and always just added. And
Mm.
there's a sense of lack of vulnerability. They
Yeah.
weren't allowed to be vulnerable in front of their peers, their boss, their reports. They just had to be able to cope with it all. And
Mm.
I think it's important that we recognize that we've got to be able to say no at some point. Otherwise,
I
we're
think,
doing a disservice not only to ourselves as individuals, to our
yeah.
organization, but also to our customers.
Yeah, I think you are spot on there. And I think, a private equity context can
Mm,
compound that because there's that pressure to always deliver more
mm,
than you've achieved, to deliver it faster, to deliver it more cost effectively. Um, and I think you are absolutely spot on. The companies that I think are going to really thrive with AI
mm,
are going to be doubling down on really looking at their culture and whether
mm,
they are creating that environment for leaders to be courageous in a world where the pace of change is exponential, the pressure is high,
mm,
they're
mm.
pulled in a myriad of directions. And actually it comes down to, do those leaders have the courage and confidence to make choices and trade-offs
Yeah, yeah.
and not be penalized for that, which is ironic because if they did everything, then I don't think that company is really going to progress in the way that they want anyway in today's world. So I
Mm.
think it's a really interesting conundrum, and I really hope companies double down on that cultural piece because I think that longer term thinking was going to play out and show the value through competitive advantage.
Tejal, thank you so much. This has been a brilliant conversation. And thank you to our listeners. Join us next time as we continue exploring elegant simplicity and how leaders can build organizations that don't just cope with complexity, but can cut right through it.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me. Bye.